Hola y bienvenidos. Me llamo Laura Carrizosa y soy la asistente de comunicaciones de Austin Opera. Hoy les presentamos un episodio muy especial de Live from Indy Terrace desde el Museo Mexic-Arte. Disfruten.
My name is Dr. George Vargas, Curator and Director of Programs at Mexic-Arte Museum in Austin, Texas. I'm a retired art historian, having taught at Texas A&M University in Kingsville. I was born in Texas, in a little border town, Terrace Springs, up by Eagle Pass, and my parents migrated north to seek employment and better educational opportunities for the family. I worked in fields, factories, eventually attending the University of Michigan, where I pursued my study of art history. I have a background in Western art history, that is Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Renaissance art, and so forth, but my specialty is Latin American art, Mexican art, Chicano art. I first began here working at the museum in March, when I was invited by Silvia Orozco, our executive director, to be a guest curator to help organize the Bruno Andrade retrospective exhibition. I knew Bruno. I went to school with him at the University of Michigan Art School, so it was a real treat for me to be working alongside Silvia and our team on that particular exhibit. And of course, it was a hardship. It was a struggle and a challenge because we were at the height of the COVID pandemic. Somehow we managed to organize a show and open our doors while still practicing all the protocols to protect ourselves and our audiences. Today we present Day of the Dead de los Muertos 37th Annual Exhibition. As I mentioned, this is the 37th annual celebration of Day of the Dead that the museum has organized, beginning with La Muerte Vive, the first exhibition where we featured the community altars, parades, performances, and a big festival atmosphere. Day of the Dead begins November the 1st, which is All Saints' Day, in which prayers are said to the saints and martyrs. That's also what we call Dia de los Angelitos, the Day of the Little Angels dedicated to the children. November 2nd is All Souls' Day, in which we say prayers and make offerings to all the beloved deceased. We also say special prayers on behalf of those in purgatory. So this celebration is a synthesis of both pre-Columbian practices and Christian or Catholic rituals. And every year during this event, the cemeteries are cleaned, the homes are also cleaned, and they make preparation for the celebration, especially in the creation of these magnificent altars that we'll see shortly. Sometimes we'll refer to them as ofrendas. This section right here features the prints from the Juan Antonio Sandoval Jr. collection. Last year, we were gifted this, and in February of 2020, we went to El Paso and we carted all of these pieces to the museum. Over 1,000 pieces were gifted to us, so we're really blessed by Juan Sandoval, who's been collecting works for over 3 decades. Most of the works are dedicated to Latinx and Latin American art. And let's look now more closely at some of these particular prints. We begin with Oscar de las Flores. This print shows us the abduction of Jose Posada, the Mexican master printmaker, and you see him in his studio, who is being abducted, kidnapped by these demons, the emissaries of the devil. We see one demon that escapes hell, and another demon, as you can see in red, abducts the victim, Posada, and you can see some other victims have been abducted as well. This printmaker in the studio is powerless to help Posada. Posada was known for influencing Mexican modern art as well as influencing contemporary Mexican-American expressions. This print is by Felipe Ehrenberg, an artist in Mexico and a close friend of the museum. This is called Chipitotec and El Conquistador. Chipitotec, this particular Aztec god right here, who is defeating the soul of the conquistador. Chipitotec is the god of vegetation, agriculture, and of springtime. And you see, if you look closely, the flayed skin that he wears. This flayed skin is symbolic of regeneration, much like a snake would shed a skin. So also this skin indicates that idea of life, death, and rebirth. And he's also the god of death and associated with the bat. And here he's, as I said, he's overpowering the soul of the conquistador. Another print, in this case by Sam Coronado. Sam Coronado was a very popular Austin printmaker and also a co-founder of this museum. This is called Los Compadres. And you can see these two friends drinking and singing and having a great time. Next we look at this print by Jesus Alvarado, Nadie es eterno, meaning no one is eternal. And we see this calavera playing an accordion. And we thought we would use this as the logo for our exhibition because Austin is a music center in Texas and in the United States. This print is made influenced by papel picado. We'll look at papel picado in a minute, looking at these altars that are decorated with papel picado. Here, this work by Eric Avery is simply entitled History. And it represents the history of the United States and its imperialism in Mexico and in Latin American countries, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico. And the devil El Diablo is the emissary of the United States. And this also represents not only the imperialism that's been impacted on Mexico and Latin America, but also the number of people who have died in various prisons and have been tortured to death in these dictatorships throughout Mexico and in Latin America. Before I begin presenting these altars, I'd like to give you some background information so we can better understand and hopefully appreciate the foundation or the influence in these altars. The original Americans, the original people of the Americas, were both in fear and in awe of the natural forces. And to better understand them, they created a cosmology by which to appreciate the phenomena and the effects on the world around them. This is what's called the quincunx. It represents the four directions and one more, 5. So we have north, east, south, and west, and up and down. These 4 quadrants, or 4 directions, each are controlled by one main god, and then maintained by 2 other gods. In the center of the quincunx is the god of duality, representing the mother and the father god, who created all the gods in the universe. We also see interspersed between the directions or the quadrants the 20 signs or symbols of the calendar. So this cosmology that the ancient Mexicanos created influenced the religion and the ritual of death of the Aztecs. The Aztecs believed that you were judged not by right or wrong, good and evil, but what you were in life and how you died. For example, if you died swimming off a barge, then that you would be sent to a specific place. If you died a warrior, again, you would be sent to a specific place. So let's begin. We look at the east, where the sun arises. And there's color symbolic of all of these, of course. This is red. And here, the warriors that have died on the battlefield or have been sacrificed to the gods are sent here. And they spent a number of years here in paradise, drinking, dancing, and singing. And then after 4 years, they return back to earth as hummingbirds. The west. The west is white, the house of corn. Here, women who have died in childbirth are sent, and they spend a number of years here, and then they return as so-called goddess women. And these goddess women are horrific looking. They wear a skull for a head and have claws. And they plague humanity, especially women and children. And this could be an influence on La Llorona. Next, the south. The south is blue. And this is controlled by the rain god, Tlaloc. Here, victims who have died, say drowning or anything having to do with water, are sent here, as well as victims who have died of diseases. And they reside in this paradise, which is named Tlalocan, which is controlled by Tlaloc, the rain god. All others are sent to the north, which is black. And they eventually undergo a trial, having to go through 9 hells before they find a resting place in the afterlife in Mictlan. Let's now look at the marvelous photographs by Mary J. Andrade. Mary J. Andrade is an expert on the history of ofrendas or altars in Mexico. These represent Michoacan, and she claims that it might be the original home where the first altars were made. Now let's look at this marvelous painting on amate paper made by the Mexican artist Cleofas. It shows a village celebrating Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, and it's very, very intricate. At the top you see a line of skeletons or calaveras also partaking in the celebration. So again, this is a celebration both for the dead and the living. Mate paper is made from the mulberry and fig tree. And when the Spaniards came here, they outlawed the Mexicans from using amate paper for whatever reason. Mexican artists still use amate paper, as we can see here. Before we begin looking more closely at these altars, let me give you a little bit of background. The cosmology and the religion of the Aztecs represented the 4 forces of nature: fire, water, earth, and wind. And in one way or another, these are represented, symbolically speaking, in these altars. There are levels that are found here in some of the more traditional altars. So in one way or another, we remember the ancient gods, although we may not recognize their names. This altar is dedicated to the Mexican muralist and great visual artist Rina Lasso, who died last year. On either side we find paintings that she made based on petroglyphs, painted walls in Baja California. And they probably represent some kind of shaman or maybe a supernatural being. And we also see, of course, animals showing the interest of the makers of these petroglyphs, animals that they would need to sustain themselves. There are usually 2 to 3, 7, or even 9 levels in these altars. The most simple contain 2 levels, that is the earth and the sky. 3 levels, that is hell, purgatory, and the heavens. So again, it's a synthesis of pre-Columbian practices with Catholic customs. And we see paints, which of course the artist used in making her paintings, as well as in making her marvelous murals, as we see here in the monitor, one of her murals that she's introducing and explaining to her visitors. Candles, food items, and other things attract the spirits, especially the soul or spirit of this famous artist. We also see the marigold flower. The marigold flower harkens back to pre-Columbian times, used by the Aztecs to both decorate as well as to bring back the spirits. The spirits are attracted to a number of things, such as water in the form of beverages, light in the form of candles, scent in the form of flowers, and of course food items representing earth. The marigold also is found in gardens. Why? Because it keeps away bugs. And we find also that they're very popular in cemeteries. This altar, or ofrenda, is dedicated to our ancestral curanderas. This altar done by Indy Guerrero. She lives here in Austin, and she has been training to be a curandera herself. We have a number of items here that are very important, representing plants that heal and are medicinal, of course. This photograph is to her guardian, Robles Lopez, and she also dedicated this altar to her mother, who shared with Indy the knowledge of herbal medicine. This altar by Melissa Lopez is called Luz de Madre, featuring the Virgen de Guadalupe, the mother of us all, as well as honoring her mother, her grandmothers, and other women in her family. This altar also is dedicated to her grandfather, who started a ranch in Chihuahua, Mexico. So this represents the family life in Chihuahua, Mexico. And again, we have different offerings, so to speak, by which to attract her beloved family members: cerveza, cigarettes, playing cards, the lit candles, pan dulce, and we also have photographs representing various family members, including a pet dog. This marvelous looking altar was created by the General Consulate of Mexico. And again, in the traditional altars, we have all the four elements of nature. Wind, as represented by the papel picado that shifts when anybody walks by or there's a breeze that hits it. Light, represented by candles. Water, represented by different beverages, including water. Salt and seeds, representing the earth. And of course, the ever-popular marigold flowers. The Catrina figure is a very famous figure that was innovated by Jose Posada. And the Catrina figure represents the Mexican elite who emulate the European taste in fashion. This altar was created by Maria Eugenia Ramirez Flores, and it's dedicated to the Latinx victims of the local community who have died of the COVID virus. We have papel picado, which symbolizes the air and dedicated to the Aztec god, the wind god. We've got skulls. We also have pan de muerte. We have lemons and limes, salt, grains, mole sauce, and other items that are meant to attract the beloved back to earth to help us to celebrate death within our lifetime. This altar is built by Hill Country Ride for AIDS, Love and Life, a duality. dedicated to the victims of AIDS, HIV, that now the disease has been compounded by the pandemic. We also see in the background a quilt from the 1980s, during which the AIDS epidemic impacted the United States. A number of these quilts were being made in our support in the fight against AIDS and HIV. Now this altar was made by Catherine Stasis, and it's entitled Vote for Them, for You, for Us. And it pays tribute to three heroes of the United States Civil Rights Movement: John Lewis, Rosa Parks, and Martin Luther King Jr. And here we find images that represent these three civil rights heroes. The bus associated with Rosa Parks in her sit-down. The church associated with Martin Luther King Jr. And the bridge, of course, symbolizing the walk that John Lewis took. This is a very precious altar made by kindergarten children of the Aldea Verde School here in Austin. And it's dedicated to the Mexican master artist Francisco Toledo. Toledo was known for making very artistic kites, and you see these kites also created by children in their honor of Francisco Toledo. Note also this sawdust. This sawdust the children made and then they colored. They also decorated these skulls and made the other decorations as well, including papel picado and the paper flowers that we see here. This altar made by Eric Castilleja, entitled Ándale, siéntate con nosotros, to honor his deceased grandmother and grandfather. And he recalls a fond memory that he has of his grandparents sitting on their porch in front of their home, stopping strangers and friends, inviting them to sit down with them. These chairs, of course, representing the deceased grandparents, and other items taken from their home. This next altar, made by Bianca San Miguel, a mother to honor her deceased 12-year-old daughter. We also see a portrait made in papel picado, commissioned by Bianca, done by an Austin-based artist. And again, there's various items that are very personal, recognizing the daughter and her favorite objects. Now here we have a very whimsical approach in this altar made by Angel Ortega, or Angel Ortega, dedicated to her Tio Lolo, who died of the COVID. And you see the guitar that he used to play, done in paper mache. And she also honors the murdered ice cream vendor, Senor Urias, who died this summer, sad to say. And Angel informs us that this particular piece is dedicated to all the ice cream vendors who have died, either through the pandemic or other ways this year. Our last meeting altar, Una Vida Unida, done by Alice Casas and Ali Garcia, who are co-owners of the Palehurst Funerary Home. They describe themselves as Chicana death care providers. Here in the center, the casket symbolizing their work as they provide and take care of the families during their hour of need upon the death of their beloved. And then family members and friends as well, depicted on either side of the casket.
favor, te llevo en mi corazón y cerca me tendrás. A solas yo te cantaré soñando a regresar. Recuérdame, aunque tenga que emigrar, recuérdame. Si mi guitarra oyes llorar, ella con su triste canto te acompañará hasta que en mis brazos estés.